Guten Tag, podcast listeners. That's all I know of for German. So there will be no other German in this episode of JJ Meets World, but we talk about some real, I guess, trigger warning on this one. We talk about some traumatic moments, but it's all to make you laugh, especially how where he used to sleep. You're going to really love it. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And if you watch it in several different chunks, sit back and relax several times. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Moments ago, before we sat in front of these microphones, just minutes ago, I had a very harrowing encounter in my front lawn.
Are you injured?
No, I'm not. But here's okay.
Good,
so
good.
Jill and I were watching an episode of Below Deck. She's not feeling well, so she's laying on the couch and she's like, "Would you just watch some TV with me?" And I said, "Sure." So I'm folding laundry, and Jill is watching Below Deck, and I can hear kids playing and childish screams down the block a little, right?
Okay.
And then I hear what sounds like some crying, and I'm like, oh, someone must have fallen off their bike or something like that. And what are you going to do? And then I see a girl run from our next door neighbor's front lawn and to the sidewalk. And then there's another kid behind her on a bike, and my dog starts to bark. And the next thing I know, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. My doorbell keeps going. And so I get up and I walk over, I open the door, and a little girl, and she couldn't have been more than 2.5, 3 feet tall at the very most, looks up at me, and she's got tears in her eyes, and she goes, "We're lost. We don't know where we are."
Oh, damn.
And I say, "Oh, okay. Well, don't worry. Okay." And the other kid that's with her is on their bike, laying in my front yard, sobbing.
Oh my God.
Sobbing, top of their lungs, sobbing. And so I immediately step outside and I say, "Okay, don't worry. You're safe. Don't worry. We'll get this handled. There's no problems. Nobody's in trouble. Don't worry." And I take a minute and I want to calm the kids down. That's the first thing I want to do, because they're both on a verge of hysteria, and they're both really sweaty. So you can tell that they've been on out in the sun. I said, "First of all, tell me where are you trying to get to?" And they're like, "We're trying to get to home." And one of them's on rollerblades. The one that came to the door is on rollerblades, and the other one is on a bike. And I said, "Where are you coming from?" And they both say church. And then they start rattling off a bunch of names, and they're like, "Do you know this person? Do you know Lindsay? Do you know this person?" And I said, "Gosh, I don't know those people. Do you know your phone number? We could call a parent." And one of them goes, yeah. And so all they can remember is their phone number starts with 1701.
Uh-huh.
And so I said, "Okay, so tell me what happened." They said, "Well, we left church and my older brother was going way faster and he got away from us and we don't know where we're going. They're trying to get to their aunt's house." I find out that the kids are cousins, and one is 8.5 and one is 9.
Okay.
And the kid that was on the bike is really having a tough time. I mean, not settling down, visibly shaking, having just an utter moment of distress. So Jill comes outside and she's, saying the same thing I am. And quite frankly, at one point she starts talking at the same time. And I'm like, "Hey, the last thing these kids need is a stimulation. Let's just keep this cool and calm. I'm the one who has crisis intervention training here." And so I say, okay, so what church do you go to? And they're like, the Catholic Church. And I was like, okay, can you be more specific? What saint are we talking about here? And they couldn't really come up with what the name is. I said, is it Nativity? Because that church is, 3 blocks from my house. No sweat, right? No. And I said, is it St. Anthony's? And they go, no, I go to St. Mary's. And I was like, St. Mary's.
Downtown.
Okay, so that's the one that's just north of the Fargo Theater, which means that these kids biked 24 blocks.
Yeah.
And rollerbladed. So no wonder they're winded. And I said, do you want a glass of water? Do you want something to drink? And they both look at each other with hesitancy. And I realize a stranger is offering them,
Oh, sure.
food and drink. And they're both smart enough to say like no to that, even if they need it. And I'm like, okay, we need to build some additional rapport here. I look at one of them and I'm like, okay, so what's your mom's name? And she rattles off something. What's your dad's name? My dad's name is, is this. And I'm not going to say the names of the, what the kids' parents' names are because I don't want to get further into this. But I said, okay, do you want me to call the police? They can come and help. And both of them immediately don't want that. And I said, the police department have special officers and their sole job is to help pets and animals and kids. And this person could come over and they they're not going to arrest you. You're not in trouble, but they've got resources that I don't have to help you get back to your parents. No. So I said, okay. So you both go to St. Mary's and one of them goes, no, I don't go to St. Mary's. And I'm like, okay, so one of you goes to St. Mary's. I said, maybe we could call the church and the church could help, with a directory or something. So I call the church, no answer at the church. And I'm like, of course they took off right away on a Sunday. Like, God forbid, literally, that you stick around just a little bit longer. And so I'm kind of at a loss for what to do here. And then I said, do you think you would be able to recognize the house if you got there? And they said, yes. So I recognize the fact that they're both in a panic state right now. And the last thing they want is to have to bike and rollerblade in the hot sun and not recognize anything around them.
Right.
Right. So I suggest that what we do is we'll get in the car and we'll drive to St. Mary's and we can work our way back from St. Mary's. And you tell me where you think your house is, because in the car, we can cover a lot of, space really quick. It's not what I ultimately want to do, but my hope is that when I get to St. Mary's, there will at least be another adult who knows their parents. There will maybe be, someone who works at the church who can access a church directory, whatever we need. So the kids get into the car and my neighbor walks over and he says, yeah, we weren't home. We were coming back from church and they've got a smart doorbell and excuse me, his wife had watched the footage of this girl being like, please help, please help, please help, please help. We're lost. Help, 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 please help. And you could hear the other girl wailing in the background. I want my mom. I want my mom. And so she had already called 911.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which, rightly so, because I mean, these kids are not just lost, they are panicked and lost.
Uh-huh.
And so I think in his mind, he's like, why is my neighbor putting these kids into the back of a car? Right. So they get out and he says, well, I've already called the we've already called the police, so we should wait until the police get here. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not going to leave now that the cops are on their way.
No, we gotta go right now.
Right. And if you think you've trapped me somehow, sir, so we're standing there and we're talking and their parents.
Is Jill at least with you?
Jill's with me. And Jill makes the smart choice of, she's like, would you like me to bring my dog out? And so she brings out George and George does a good job, distracting these this boy and this girl a little bit. So I'm talking to them and trying to get a little more information. And they're like, my dad's name is this and uses the last name. And I was like, oh, is this your dad's profession? And I name it. And they said, yes, that's where he works. And I'm like, oh, I know. I know your dad. I've met your dad many, many times. And so I was lucky, and I was like, I don't have your dad's phone number, but I have your uncle's phone number in my phone. So I call it. That phone number doesn't work. I haven't called it in years. But then I'm like, I know other people. So I call previous guest on the and frequent JJ Meets World listener, Rachel Hoffman. And I was like, Rachel, can you get me the number for so-and-so? And she's like, well, I don't have it, but I could get it from somebody else. And I'm like, well, could you please get it? Not explaining what's going on, but just that there's some urgency involved with it, right? So then I'm like, well, maybe his phone number's on his LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It wasn't on there.
Okay.
But then this kid starts, says another name, and I'm like, I know that person too, and so it gets to the point of where like I know who this kid is now, and at least to the point of where I know how to connect them back with their parents. So maybe 3 minutes goes by, and a black SUV pulls up, and it's one of the kid's uncles, and it's one of the people I actually recognize. They open the door, they get in the back, and I say they're both very smart. They asked my wife and I if we're kidnappers, and we said no. And then they asked like a second and third time just to make sure that we don't slip up and accidentally go like, of course we are. So I'm like, they're very smart. And he was talking a mile a minute, being like, well, they just, they're riding home and they just made a mistake. And I'm like, listen, nobody is mad about this situation. We're happy that these kids are back with that. And at that like same moment, 2 squad cars come in from both directions on the block, making like a little like pincer move. And we kind of give the like, everything's okay. It's okay. They're supposed to be with this person. And so then the cops took off. And then the guy took off, but it was a harrowing moment. It was quite the day in the Gordon front lawn.
Damn. How damn, that is a hell of a way to spend a Sunday.
It really was. And I thought to myself, I was like, what am I going to do to calm down? And I was like, you know what? I'm recording a JJ Meets World. This is going to be a great episode.
But also like your neighbor, when she saw the door footage and called 911. Yeah, that's the appropriate response. Like, right. Oh my God, there's footage of a kid crying, going, help us, we're lost.
Right. And like when I went back, we've got double glazed windows, so you can't really hear a lot outside. But when I look back at our smart doorbell footage, these kids were wailing. Oh my God, it was intense.
Yeah, just hold on to that footage, and then when they like graduate or get married or something, like
just sneak it into like the slideshow.
Yeah.
Not all heroes wear capes, everybody. Do you think? Okay, so let me ask you this: did you ever get lost as a kid? Like, did you ever do a thing where like you ran away or you got seriously lost?
I never ran away. I can't think of a time I got seriously lost. Like maybe for a few minutes at like a mall or something like that. That probably happened a few times. But for the most part, I mean, I just didn't really wander off.
My dad's business partner had a son, and then 2 years later had a set of twins, and we called them the Triple Tornadoes because these kids were naughty, really sweet, but naughty kids. And I doubt he listens to it, so I'll say his name out loud, but his name is Ben. And my dad used to come home with like stories that his business partner would tell him, and I would laugh my rear end off. And this is one of those stories. It's almost Christmas, and they're walking through the mall, and it's Ben and his parents, and he wants to stop at KB Toys, which used to be just outside JCPenney in the West Acres Mall. And they're like, nope, we gotta go. No toys today. They get about 2 store lengths away, and one of them is holding onto his hand, and he's kind of trying to struggle. And he's a little kid. We're talking like 4, maybe 5. And, he's kind of putting up a little tantrum. And then at the top of his lungs, he goes, help me, I'm being kidnapped. And everybody in the mall turns, right? And There is nothing you can say in that moment that does anything. So a bunch of people instantly approach and they kind of try and grab him, and they end up having to go to like the mall security office until they can prove that this is actually their son and separate them. Like, right. So they separate the kid from the parents. It becomes like a whole thing. And I remember my dad had tears in his eyes. He was laughing so hard telling me about this. And I said, so ultimately, like what's the story here? And he goes, oh, that kid's never going back to the mall again.
Yeah,
ever.
never.
Not for a million years. And talk about the boy who cried wolf, right? Help me, I'm being kidnapped. Oh, it was such a glorious story.
Any idea like how long he kept it up for?
Oh, they were there for well over an hour.
So he was like for an hour saying like, I don't know them. They're kidnapping me.
No. So the second that they got over there, he just clammed up.
Okay.
Like, because he was worried that he was in trouble now, right?
I see. He just didn't say anything.
Right. So, which is in fact, actually even worse. Right. And like, you don't like a 4-year-old boy doesn't necessarily look exactly like his parents. You're still growing into who you're going to be, but became a whole thing. And then, so I'll tell another triple tornado story. So when the twins were like 2 years old, so old enough to like stand up on their own and do a little bit of walking, but they're not yet potty trained. There is a night where my dad's partner in the middle of the night, like one of the kids is crying. And so he goes in there and both kids have cribs in the same room. And so he goes in there and he goes, the smell when he walked in was just horrific. One of the kids had thrown up and he's like, oh God. And so he takes the kid and he takes him to the bathroom and gets him cleaned up. And as he approaches the bedroom, he realizes he's left the light on. And the other kid, who was like not sleeping, but just kind of laying there because, his brother had been crying, has gotten up and taken off his diaper and smeared it all over the wall. And I'm not talking about like one swipe. Like he's painted the wall. His crib can touch 2 walls and a corner, and he smeared it everywhere. There's poop all over the inside of his like crib. It is a disaster zone. And he's like, what's happening? And he looks at the kid, and the kid immediately goes, bleh, and throws up everywhere. So he takes the kid that he's cleaned and quarantines him and brings him to his room. And so then he starts out like he grabs the other kid and he, like pulls him out of the room and starts washing him up. And then, dreading the idea of having to go back and clean human fecal matter off of the walls. He gets back to his room where his wife is still asleep, and he didn't put a diaper back on this kid.
Oh no.
And he's had explosive 2-year-old diarrhea all over the bed. And he looks at it, he's like, oh my God, you were throwing up. You weren't pooping. And so the other kid looks at this and smells the air, and then he throws up. And so it's clear that both of these kids are sick, right? They both must have the flu or something like that. So now they've got 2 rooms that are covered in pee and puke, and they've got 2 kids who are both covered in pee and poop, depending on which ones, or puke and puke.
I think we get it. Yeah, I think we get it.
Oh my God. And like, so he said, so my dad was like, so his partner beat him in, which is weird because his partner lived in the lakes area. And he's like, oh yeah, my wife is taking care of it today. He's like, I did the best I could do last night. And we all slept in the guest bedroom down the hall with our 2, like super sick kids. And he goes, and when I left the house today, the house smelled like someone had died in it and was decomposing because and he goes, you don't realize this, but like he had stepped in something in the night. And so he had drug it back and forth, just miserable. But the kids were happy as clams and thought it was so funny that they had put their poop on the wall and they had pooped in the bed and they had puked. They thought it was just hilarious.
I mean, to be fair, I think it's pretty funny too.
Right. I do too, because I didn't have to clean it. And that's probably the best part of it, right?
Yep.
What do you, okay, so you never ran away. Do you remember a time when you may have defecated a lot?
Oh, let me think. I mean, yeah, I've had all sorts of legendary moments on the
When
toilet.
you were a kid, though, like, do you remember like a time when you were a kid?
No, I really don't. Yeah,
I'll tell you about a time.
about when I was a kid.
No, when I was a kid.
I was like, what else has Dad told you? I remember one time I fell asleep. I would fall asleep on the floor of the bathroom sometimes.
Because you were neglected, or
No, like I'd get up in the middle of the night, like go use the bathroom or whatever, and then when I'm done, I would like lay down for a moment on the floor of the bathroom because like the tile felt cool.
Oh,
And then I would just fall asleep, and my parents would find me there.
well, I mean, that's kind of sweet and kind of nice, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of gross, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's also not me like pooping myself.
Have you done that in your adult life? Have you slept on a lot of bathroom floors?
No, not that I can recall.
Oh, you're missing out. So I told this story twice this summer, and it's the first time I've told it since I was a kid. And it's one of probably the most horrific, embarrassing stories of my entire life. And I was old enough to like walk around on my own, but and it wasn't common to have accidents at my age, but I had them every now and then. So we were at a nursery near the lakes area, and it was one that was like a permanent space, is actually right over by the Pelican Lake Zorbas. And it was right on the way to the lake, and we had stopped there, and my mom was buying flowers that she was going to plant at the lake. And my mom, lovely woman, but really didn't have a sense of time for everyone else. So when we stopped, I think we had been there for like an hour, and it was hot. And I just didn't know what to do. And there were no bathrooms. And I was like, we got to go. I need to go to the bathroom. And no one was really taking it seriously. And I pooped my pants. And it was like little tiny boy underpants. And so my dad was like, well, we got to get you cleaned up. And so he took me behind this giant dirt pile. And it's dirt that you would buy to like put together a garden with, right? Topsoil.
Some dirt to clean your dirt.
And so, we take off my pants, and there's the poopy underpants, and he uses the underpants to like kind of clean me up, like the front side. And then there's a question of what we're going to do with the underpants. And there was a shovel in the dirt, and he dug a little hole, and we put my soiled undergarments in there. And then he grabbed me, by the hand, and he's leading me out. And he goes, Pat, we gotta go. And and here's the thing. I have relatives who have a cabin less than 5 minutes from there.
Sure.
So we went there, and I borrowed a pair of my cousin's underpants, which were way too big because they were like 4 years older than me. But at least I was wearing something underneath my little tiny shorts.
And also, I wouldn't have like lent them to you. I would have said, you can have these.
These were just Phoenix Suns.
These are just yours now.
So, and then of course, because we have to ask for a pair of underpants, now my aunt and uncle know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, here's the thing.
They're going to tell their friends.
So no one in my family ever mentions it again, to my face at least. Maybe behind my back, but never to my face. And I actually like appreciate that. But for the next 17 years, we drive by that fucking place every single time we go to the lake. And every time I look at it, and now they've shut it down, and they've actually torn out the buildings that are there. So it's just nothing. And so there's not a chance. There's a 100% certainty that someone in the lakes area has a small garden, and my shitty underpants are buried somewhere deep in that garden because it just was included in a big chunk of topsoil that they took.
What I guess was this polyester, cotton? Like, do you think the fibers would be intact still?
Oh, I guarantee it.
With the amount of acidic organic matter that was in
it. I mean, for sure it was elastic, like an elastic band. And I usually had underpants with something on it, so it might have been like Ghostbusters underpants.
Uh-huh.
I doubt they glowed in the dark, but that is also a possibility. I mean, clothes hang around for a long time if they're not, like if they're just buried in the ground, right?
Yeah. in 1993, 1993 or 1994, I had a pet gerbil named Nikki. And one night I was looking at Nikki's cage and I said, "Hey, Dad, Nikki's like laying on his back. He's not moving. Is he sleeping?" And Dad looked at him. He's like, "Oh, no, son. No, Nikki's dead." Right. So I'm really broken up about it because I really like this gerbil. And the next day at school, like I'm struggling all day through school. And when I get home, Dad had taken Nicky and like put him off to the side somewhere, but we hadn't buried him yet. And so he had him in like this little plastic container, and we lived out by the Red River. And so we buried him back there. And every small once in a while, I end up driving past that place, and I wonder if like he's still in his sarcophagus or not, because it was like a really thick plastic. It wasn't like one that was going to biodegrade over the years.
Yeah.
But it was also by the Red River. So that area has been flooded so many times. I would assume he went out to sea somewhere at some point.
Isn't that interesting? So I've got a couple dead pets buried in my backyard, and I'm terrified that one day, like, I'll find the skull of one of them.
I'm pretty sure Dad buried Rudy back there, I think. But as far as I'm aware of, there are no other animals buried in my backyard.
That we know of, right?
That we know of.
That's the thing of like, I don't think you have to tell future homeowners if there's a dead animal. A dead person, sure, but a dead animal, I don't think so.
Here's a weird, creepy thing that actually happened to me recently, JJ, and I called the police and made a report about it.
Oh.
The other day, I came home for lunch, and I went to take out my garbage. And on our block, the garbage cans go out in the alleyway where the garbage truck will drive through there. So I go out through my garage to the alley, throw my garbage away. And as I'm walking back in, you know how I've got just that big pile of like scrap wood and shit, like sheet metal and stuff that's back there?
Yeah.
Wedged in between that pile and the side of the garage is a backpack, a gray backpack that I can tell right away is full. It looks like it's stuffed with things. And I'm like, that's weird. And I go and I touch it. It's wet. And it kind of smells like it's been outside for a bit, although I'd never noticed it before. So I went inside and I put on some thick dishwashing gloves. And I took the backpack out just outside and I just emptied it out like slowly, like, all right, what the hell is in here? And I didn't find any ID or anything. There was nothing illicit in there, like no drugs or something like that. But it was a bunch of women's clothing and underwear and hair care products, like a blow dryer and a hair crimper, a bunch of makeup, like in this big makeup case, and a set of headphones that looked like the padding on one side had been chewed away by like a mouse or something. Like tampons and maxi pads. It looked like someone was like, hey, I'm going to be staying at a friend's house for a few days, and these are the things I'm going to need or something, right? And so I'm like, this is weird. And so I put it all back together, and I had to go back to work. So I just put it right back where it was, thinking that's weird. I need to figure out what I should do about this thing. So I get back after work and I call my dad, and I just wanted to rule out, like, do you know why this would be here? Like, would this have been something that was in the crazy amount of shit we had in the garage at one point and accidentally got moved out? And he's like, no. And honestly, man, I would call the police. That's what he tells me. He's like, I would just call the police and be like, hey, like, I don't know what this is, but this is back here. Someone left it and it's weird. So I'm like, okay. So called the police, called like the dispatch, didn't do 911. And they took the report and they were like, okay, we're going to have someone come out and get it. It just will be not right now because there's a lot of things going on. And I said, okay, no problem. And the very next morning it was gone. So I'm guessing at some point the police drove through the alleyway and took it. So that was just weird.
I wonder if they'll give you, I mean, I doubt they would, but like some kind of follow up.
I mean, if it leads to something like really suspicious, then I would guarantee they would be like, hey, who are you? Tell us again how you found this, right? Since it was on my property.
I mean,
but-
in a way, it'd be a smart way. Like if you had been some kind of murderer,
right. Well, I've been thinking about what the hell it could be, because if it was someone trying to ditch stuff, right? Like, let's say that was a stolen backpack or something and they wanted to ditch it. Why wouldn't they have thrown it in one of the like 50 garbage cans that are in the alleyway, right? Like they're everywhere. This person, whoever it was, had to like take a few steps out of the alley and look down in a spot that really wasn't that well hidden. It was just sort of out of the way, but it wasn't like obscured really. But it was also in a spot where you just wouldn't like toss it. Like they had to like kind of shove it down in there. Another thought was, okay, maybe it belongs to a homeless person and they were passing through and they, just put it down somewhere where they were resting back there for a moment, just hanging out. And then when they got up to leave, they didn't pick up their backpack or something.
sure.
So that I think is probably the most likely thing. And another thing could just be that someone stole it quick and took out whatever was valuable in it, which is why there was no ID or money or drugs or anything in it. And then just sort of tossed it off to the side a bit, but I have no idea.
So, okay. But in that scenario, you had some kind of a robber walking down your back alley, utilizing it as as an escape route.
Right. Yep.
Which isn't good either.
Nope, not good either.
God, what if he knew about your VHS collection?
Oh, that's true. Shit. You know what? I should get a gun.
Well, I was just gonna say, before you get a gun, I think you should just fortify.
Yeah, with like a gun and just
like you just pile up a bunch of guns. Is that what you're saying? You'll just pile up a bunch of guns to make it harder for them to gain entry?
Yeah, buy my VHS tapes specifically for those things. No, I'm not going to do that.
Right, because it'd be much better is a cannon.
Yeah. Would be like a trench that I can set on fire.
There you go.
That's probably the best option.
Fill it with petroleum, and as soon as they get close, as soon as anyone gets close, just light it ablaze. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. Here's the thing. It's really possible that one day they'll unearth my little tiny boy underpants and think I had been murdered.